He trusted them. He fought beside them. He made them powerful. He helped them rise. He gave them influence. He gave them a future inside Rome. And in the end, they killed him. But the most shocking part was not the murder itself. It was not the knives. It was not the blood. It was not even the conspiracy. It was the fact that the men who turned on him were not strangers. They were the men around him, the men who spoke to him, the men who smiled at him, the men he trusted. And one of them was the friend who broke him the most. This is the story of power, the story of fear, the story of ambition, and the story of one of the greatest betrayals in history, the betrayal of Julius Caesar. Before the betrayal, before the blood, before the Senate floor was stained with death, there was power. Julius Caesar was not born a king. He did not inherit a throne. He did not begin life as the ruler of Rome. But from an early age, it was obvious that he was not an ordinary man. He was ambitious, he was intelligent, he was bold, and he understood something that many men never truly understand. Power does not come to those who wait. It comes to those who take risks. Caesar knew how to speak. He knew how to persuade. He knew how to lead. And more importantly, he knew how to win. As he rose through Roman politics, he built alliances. He built connections. He built influence. Then, he proved himself in war. He became one of Rome's greatest military commanders. He led campaigns that made him famous. He conquered Gaul. He expanded Roman territory. He brought glory to Rome. And every victory made his name bigger. To the people of Rome, Caesar was not just a successful general. He was a hero. He gave them victories. He gave them pride. He gave them someone to admire. The common people loved him. They saw strength in him. They saw confidence in him. They saw a man who could change Rome. But while the people admired him, the Senate feared him. Because the Senate understood something the crowd did not. Every Roman victory gave Caesar more than fame. It gave him power. And power in Rome was dangerous, especially when it was held by one man. The senators began to watch him carefully. They saw his growing influence. They saw his popularity. They saw how easily he could move hearts, armies, and politics, and many of them began to ask the same question. What happens if Julius Caesar becomes too powerful to stop? That question would change history. There was one moment that made everything worse. One moment that made fear turn into crisis. The Rubicon. The Rubicon was not just a river. It was a line, a boundary, a warning. If Caesar crossed it with his army, it meant rebellion. It meant civil war. It meant there would be no turning back. And Caesar crossed it. With that single decision, Rome was thrown into chaos. Romans turned against Romans. The Republic turned against itself. Civil war began. Caesar moved forward with confidence. He fought against his enemies. He defeated his rivals. And one by one, the forces standing against him collapsed. In the end, Caesar won. He returned to Rome not as a servant of the Republic, but as the most powerful man in it. He was declared dictator. That alone was enough to trouble many senators. But then something happened that terrified them even more. He was named dictator for life. For life. That title changed everything. To Caesar's supporters, it was a reward for his greatness, a recognition of his strength, a symbol of stability after years of chaos. But to his enemies, it was a warning. A dictator for life was not just a leader. He was a man above the system, a man above limits, a man above everyone else. And for many in the Senate, that sounded too much like a king. Rome hated kings, or at least it claimed to. The Roman Republic was built on the idea that no one man should rule absolutely. So when Caesar stood above all others, fear spread quickly. Some senators were afraid for Rome, some were afraid for the Republic, and some were afraid for themselves. Because Caesar's rise meant their influence was shrinking, their power was fading, their importance was disappearing. And in that fear, jealousy began to grow. The senators saw a man who had everything: military glory, political power, public love, personal loyalty. He was becoming too large for the old system, too powerful to control, too dangerous to ignore. So a conspiracy began. Not in the open, not with banners, not with speeches, but in whispers, in private meetings, in hidden agreements. A group of senators decided that Caesar had to die. Not one man, not two men, but a circle of conspirators. Among them were two names history would never forget: Cassius and Brutus. Cassius was sharp, bitter, and deeply suspicious of Caesar. He feared what Caesar was becoming, but he also resented him. Cassius was one of the driving forces behind the conspiracy. He understood that to kill Caesar, knives alone would not be enough. He needed legitimacy. He needed a name the public would trust. He needed someone whose presence would make the murder look like a sacrifice for Rome, not a selfish act. He needed Brutus. And that is what makes this story so painful. Because Brutus was not just another senator. He was not just another political rival. He was not just another man in the room. He was close to Caesar, very close. Brutus was respected, noble, thoughtful, serious. He had a reputation for honor, and Caesar trusted him. That trust is the heart of this story. Because Caesar did not just see Brutus as a political figure. He saw him as someone near to him, someone safe, someone loyal. Some stories even suggest that Caesar cared for Brutus almost like a son. Whether that was fully true or not, one thing is clear: Brutus mattered to him. That is why the betrayal hit harder than any blade. Brutus was not known as a cruel man. He was not naturally vicious. He was not the type of man history easily paints as evil, and that is part of what makes his role so tragic. Because Brutus believed he was doing the right thing. He was torn between two loyalties: his loyalty to Caesar and his loyalty to Rome, between friendship and duty, between affection and principle. Cassius understood that conflict, and he used it. He convinced Brutus that Caesar was becoming a tyrant, that if Caesar continued to rise, Rome would lose its freedom, that the Republic would die. Again and again, the argument was repeated. Caesar is becoming too powerful. Caesar wants a crown. Caesar will destroy the Republic. And slowly, Brutus began to believe it. That is what makes betrayal so dangerous. It does not always begin with hate. Sometimes it begins with justification. Brutus did not tell himself he was betraying a friend. He told himself he was saving Rome. And once a man believes that, he can do terrible things while still thinking of himself as honorable. The plan moved forward. The conspirators waited. The moment was coming. But before it arrived, there were warnings. Warnings that now feel almost unbelievable.
A soothsayer warned Caesar, "Beware the Ides of March."
It was a strange warning, a haunting one, a warning tied to a single date, March 15th. Then there were signs, strange feelings, uncertainty, an atmosphere of danger.
And even Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, was frightened. She begged him not to go to the Senate. She feared something terrible would happen.
But Caesar ignored the warnings. Maybe he believed they were superstition. Maybe he believed his power protected him. Maybe he simply could not imagine that the real danger was already standing beside him. That morning, he prepared to go. He was calm, confident, certain of himself. Why wouldn't he be? He had defeated armies. He had conquered lands. He had survived civil war. He was Julius Caesar. And yet, for all his strength, for all his genius, for all his victories, he was walking toward the one enemy he had failed to see, the Senate chamber. That was where it would happen. Not on a battlefield, not in open war, not against foreign enemies, but in a political hall, among men in Roman robes, among men who knew his face, among men who spoke his language, among men who had stood beside him. He entered the meeting. There was no sign of panic, no open threat, no obvious danger. At first, everything seemed normal. That is often how betrayal works. It arrives wearing a familiar face. The conspirators moved closer. They surrounded him. One of them approached with a petition. Another moved into position. Another waited for the signal. Then suddenly, it began. A hand grabbed him. Another man pulled at his robe. Then the first knife struck. It happened fast. Too fast. A stab. Then another. Then another. The room exploded into chaos. Men surged forward. Blades flashed. Voices rose. The air filled with panic. Caesar tried to resist. He tried to understand. He tried to react. But this was not a duel. This was not one enemy he could face. This was a group, a circle, a wall of betrayal closing in from every side. The blades kept coming. History says he was stabbed 23 times. 23. But the deepest wound was not in his body. It came when he saw Brutus, in the middle of the violence, in the middle of the panic, in the middle of the blood. He saw his friend, Brutus, standing there with a knife. And in that instant, the meaning of everything changed. This was no longer just an assassination. It was betrayal. Personal betrayal. Intimate betrayal. The betrayal of trust. The man he trusted was part of it. The man he respected was part of it. The man who should have stood beside him was standing among his killers. That moment broke him. Not the pain, not the blood, not even the fear. The betrayal.
According to the famous story, Caesar looked at Brutus and said, "Et tu, Brute? Even you, Brutus."
Whether those were his exact words or not, the meaning has lived for centuries. Even you? You too? The one I trusted? The one who was close to me? The one who mattered? That is why this scene survived history. Because almost everyone understands that kind of pain. To be attacked by enemies is one thing. To be destroyed by a friend is something else entirely. After seeing Brutus, Caesar stopped fighting. That detail matters, because it suggests something heartbreaking. The final thing that defeated him was not the knife, it was the realization. He gave up. He collapsed, and Julius Caesar fell. The most powerful man in Rome fell not to an army, but to betrayal. The conspirators believed they had saved the Republic. They believed they had prevented tyranny. They believed history would praise them. But they were wrong. Very wrong. Instead of restoring peace, they unleashed chaos. Instead of saving Rome, they destabilized it even more. Instead of ending Caesar's influence, they made him even larger in death. The people of Rome were horrified. They did not celebrate the murder. They were shocked by it, angered by it, moved by it, because whatever the senators believed, to many Romans, Caesar had been a hero, and now he was dead. Murdered, not in war, but by fellow Romans. The city was thrown into emotional turmoil. The murder did not heal Rome. It deepened the wound. Then came revenge. From Caesar's side, new power began to rise. A young man named Octavian, later known as Augustus, stepped forward. He would become one of the key figures in avenging Caesar. And slowly, the conspirators began to lose control. Brutus and Cassius had struck first, but history was turning against them. War returned, conflict spread, the struggle for power continued, and in the end, Brutus and Cassius lost everything. They were defeated, broken, and eventually, both took their own lives. That is one of the great ironies of the story. The men who believed they were saving Rome destroyed themselves, and the final twist is even darker. The Senate killed Caesar because they feared he would end the Republic. But after his death, the Republic was not saved. It died anyway, because from the chaos that followed, a new political order emerged. Rome did not become more free. It became an empire. In trying to stop one man from dominating Rome, the conspirators helped create a system where emperors would dominate it for generations. That is why this story matters. It is not just a murder story. It is not just a political story. It is not just an ancient story. It is a story about fear, ambition, power, trust, and the devastating force of betrayal. Julius Caesar was not destroyed by strangers. He was destroyed by men he knew, men he trusted, men who stood close enough to strike. And the most painful part of all was that one of them was Brutus. Not just a senator, not just a conspirator, but a friend. That is why the story survived for more than 2,000 years. Because empires change, governments change, leaders change. But betrayal by a trusted friend always feels the same. This was not just a murder. It was a betrayal. A betrayal by friends. A betrayal by the people closest to him. And a lesson that still lives today. Sometimes, the most dangerous enemy in the room is not the one shouting against you. It is the one standing quietly beside you. The one smiling at you. The one speaking gently. The one waiting for the perfect moment. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe, because the next story may be even darker.